Have you ever noticed how the deepest wounds do not come from our enemies, but from the people we invited into our most quiet spaces? Think about that for a moment. When a stranger misunderstands you, it fades away like a passing cloud. But when someone you trusted, someone you handed the fragile, unspoken pieces of your life, turns around and carelessly offers those pieces to the world, the pain is entirely different. It leaves you breathless. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about the relationship. And even worse, it makes you question your own judgment. What if the shock you are feeling right now is not just about the words that were shared? Here is the truth few people want to face. The true source of your suffering in this moment is the sudden, violent shattering of an illusion. You believed you were standing on solid ground. You believed this friendship was a safe harbor where your truth could rest comfortably. And in a single instant, that ground gave way. When we discover a betrayal of this kind, the mind immediately begins to race. We replay old conversations, searching for hidden warnings. We wonder who else knows. We feel exposed, vulnerable, and deeply alone. We try to force the puzzle pieces back together, desperate to make the friendship look exactly the way it did yesterday. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that much of our suffering comes from our attachment to permanence. We attach ourselves to the idea of an unchanging bond. We assume that because a friend safely held our trust in the past, they will inevitably always possess the wisdom to hold it in the future. But human beings are beautifully and dangerously unpredictable. They are swayed by ego, by the desire for attention, by thoughtlessness, and by their own restless inner noise. Imagine a deep, quiet lake hidden in a forest. For years, you have walked to the edge of this lake, dropping your heaviest, most private stones into its waters, trusting the dark depth to keep them hidden and safe. But one day, the season shifts. A harsh drought arrives. The water recedes under the hot sun. The lake did not set out to destroy you. It simply lost the capacity to hold what you gave it when the climate changed. Ask yourself, what are you grieving more right now? The secret that was exposed, or the painful realization that the lake is no longer deep enough to hold your stones? It is entirely natural to feel the sharp sting of this exposure. But remember this, their inability to protect your truth is a reflection of their current limitations, not a reflection of your worth. You were not foolish for trusting them. Trust is the beautiful, courageous act of an open spirit. The fact that you were willing to be vulnerable means you have the capacity for deep, profound connection. Do not let someone else's lack of awareness turn your open heart into a permanently closed fist. Pause. Breathe. Observe the heavy, sinking feeling in your chest without following it into despair. The illusion is broken, and the pain is real. Let the feeling rise without making it your permanent identity. You do not have to fix the friendship right now. You only need to witness the truth of what has happened, because peace is not found in wishing the betrayal never occurred. It is found in seeing the reality of the situation clearly, without the heavy burden of denial. But seeing the truth of a changed person is only the first step, and this is where the next truth begins. 2. The illusion of the unchanging bond. What if the heaviest weight you are carrying right now is the ghost of who your friend used to be? Here is a truth that is deeply uncomfortable to accept. We rarely see people as they are today. We see them as they were on the day we first trusted them. When you discover that your deeply held secrets were carelessly handed to others, your mind violently protests. You tell yourself, "But we have been close for years." You remember the late nights, the quiet conversations, and the moments they stood by you. You feel profoundly confused because the person who betrayed your trust does not match the beautiful image you hold in your mind. You are trying to fit the painful actions of a stranger into the familiar outline of an old friend. This internal conflict tears at your peace. You feel betrayed not just by their whispered words, but by the sudden realization that they are no longer who you thought they were. In Buddhist thought, the root of much of our daily pain is our resistance to impermanence. We build a grand statue of someone in our minds, cast in solid stone, and we demand that they never alter. But human nature is not solid. People are constantly shifting, influenced by new environments, hidden insecurities, and the slow passing of time. Buddhism reminds us that nothing stays exactly as it was, not the seasons, not the light in the sky, and certainly not the human heart. Imagine a river flowing steadily toward the ocean. You stood by this river years ago and found its water to be sweet, clear, and perfectly safe. You built your camp beside it, trusting it to sustain you. But years pass. Heavy storms disturb the soil upstream. Branches break and fall into the current. When you kneel to drink from it today, the water is muddy, turbulent, and bitter. You stare at the surface and demand to know where the clear water went. You feel angry at the river, but the water you remember has long since washed away into the sea. The river still bears the same name, but its nature in this moment is completely different. This is what happens in our human connections. People evolve, sometimes in beautiful directions, and sometimes in ways that distance them from our core values. Your friend may have been a perfectly safe harbor in the past, but modern pressures, a sudden desire for social approval, or their own unexamined pain may have muddied their waters. When they shared your private truth, they acted from the messy reality of who they are today, not the loyal person you remember from years ago. Think about your own life. Are you reacting to the reality of what this friend just did, or are you desperately defending the memory of who they were? What are you afraid will happen if you simply accept that they have changed? Pause. Breathe. Observe the sharp difference between the beautiful memory in your head and the difficult reality of this present moment. Stop trying to force the muddy water to become clear just because you remember it that way. Let the truth of their current actions stand without fighting it. You do not have to hate them for changing, but you must stop expecting them to be the person they used to be. You can let the image go, because letting go of their past self is the only way to find your footing in the present. But accepting this change often brings up a deep, quiet fear. The fear that if we accept the betrayal, we must somehow erase all the good that came before it. And this is where the next truth begins. 3. Why we cling to the ghost of the past. There is a strange kind of freedom in realizing you are holding on to something that no longer exists. But if it is gone, why is it so incredibly hard to open your hand? When a deep trust is broken, our first instinct is not always to walk away. Often, our instinct is to grip the relationship even tighter. We bargain with ourselves. We make excuses for their careless words. We convince ourselves that if we just explain how badly they hurt us, they will miraculously transform back into the safe person we once knew. We stay loyal to a version of them that only lives in our memory. And we do this because the alternative feels too heavy to bear. The thought of losing someone who knows your history, your quiet fears, and your hidden struggles is terrifying. So, we cling. We endure the sting of their betrayal because we secretly believe a broken connection is better than an empty space. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is understanding the nature of grasping. We suffer profoundly because we try to freeze time. We demand that an impermanent relationship remain untouched by the passing years. Buddhist wisdom teaches that attachment is not merely about caring for someone. It is the desperate, heavy need to lock them into a specific role in our lives. We treat relationships like possessions we cannot afford to lose, rather than living, breathing experiences meant to be navigated and sometimes released. Imagine a tall, ancient tree standing at the edge of a deep forest. As the bitter winds of autumn arrive, Its leaves turn brown, dry, and fragile. But the tree does not spend its energy desperately trying to glue the dead leaves back onto its branches. It does not panic when the wind pulls them away. It simply lets them fall. It allows its branches to become bare, trusting that it must quietly survive the cold emptiness of winter before any new growth can begin. Yet, in our own lives, we are terrified of the winter. When a friend exposes our secrets, they are showing us that their season as our closest confidant has passed. But instead of letting the leaf fall, we desperately try to reattach it. We try to force deep intimacy with someone who has clearly shown they can no longer hold it safely. We smile at the same gatherings, we swallow our hurt, and we pretend the foundation is not cracked, all because we are deeply afraid of losing our shared history. Ask yourself, are you holding on to this friendship because it still brings you genuine peace, or simply because you are terrified of the empty space it will leave behind? Is your grip bringing you comfort or feeding your fear? Pause. Breathe. Notice the tension in your hands. You do not have to abandon the person completely today, but you must stop clinging to the ghost of what was. Let the reality of their actions stand without immediately trying to fix it. Stop trying to force the dead leaf to stay on the branch. You are allowed to let it fall. Because trying to sustain a deep connection that has lost its protective foundation will slowly drain the light from your spirit. The weight of unexpressed hurt will build quietly inside your chest, turning slowly into something much darker. And this is where the next truth begins. 4. The heavy burden of resentment. Most people do not realize that the anger that follows a betrayal is often much heavier than the betrayal itself. Here is the truth few people want to face. When you discover your quiet secrets have been spoken aloud, your mind immediately goes to war. You lay awake at night, endlessly replaying the scenario. You imagine the careless words they used. You feel the heat of injustice rising in your chest. You want them to understand the profound depth of their thoughtlessness. You gather your anger like a thick, heavy shield, believing that as long as you stay furious, you are protected from being hurt again. But in holding on to this deep, bitter resentment, you are quietly keeping the wound wide open. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that holding on to anger is like grasping a burning ember in your bare hand, waiting for the perfect moment to throw it at the person who wronged you. In the end, you are the only one who burns. Buddhism reminds us that resentment is a fire that consumes the vessel that holds it. It does not punish the friend who carelessly shared your truth. It only burns through your own remaining peace. Imagine a small wooden boat moving through rough, turbulent water. A sudden storm damages its sails and breaks its oars. The captain is deeply furious at the sky, but instead of letting the wind carry him toward the safety of the shoreline, he drops a heavy iron anchor in the middle of the violent waves. He refuses to move until the storm somehow apologizes for the damage it caused. The waves continue to crash against the wooden hull. The boat slowly begins to take on water. He is sinking his own ship simply to prove how badly he was wronged. In our own lives, we drop the anchor of resentment constantly. We stalk their social media, silently hoping to see that they are unhappy. We replay the betrayal to anyone who will listen, keeping the painful story alive in our daily conversations. We let the thought of their broken trust distract us from our work, our quiet mornings, and our presence with the people who still love us. We allow someone else's careless moment to become the heavy center of our entire world. Ask yourself, is this burning anger actually keeping you safe from further harm? Or is it simply exhausting your spirit and blinding you to the beauty that is still in front of you? Is this thought bringing you peace or feeding your misery? Pause. Breathe. Feel the heat of your frustration in your chest. Observe the anger without throwing more wood onto the fire. You are allowed to be deeply hurt. You do not have to pretend it is okay, but do not let your resentment become the anchor that pulls you entirely under the dark water. Stop holding on to the burning ember. Drop the heavy iron anchor, not as a favor to them, but as an act of profound mercy for your own heart. Because peace is not something you receive when the other person finally understands your pain. Peace is what happens when you simply decide to let the fire burn out. But letting go of the anger does not mean you have to the memory of everything the friendship once was. And this is where the next truth begins. 5. Honoring the truth of what was good. What if the hardest part of moving forward is feeling like you have to pretend the entire past was a lie? Here is the truth few people want to face. When a friendship fractures under the weight of betrayal, society often tells us we must completely erase the person from our story. When you realize your secrets were shared, a strange internal war begins. You feel pressured to mentally burn the photographs, delete the old messages, and convince yourself that this friend was always fundamentally flawed. You try to rewrite your own history to protect your fragile heart. You tell yourself the laughter was fake, the late-night support was a manipulation, and the years of connection were a complete waste of time. You feel deeply conflicted when a random, beautiful memory suddenly makes you smile, only to be followed instantly by the sharp, suffocating sting of what they just did. You force yourself to hate every version of them, believing that total rejection is the only way to heal. But trying to convince yourself that the good moments meant nothing is a quiet betrayal of your own lived experience. Buddhist wisdom teaches us the profound practice of holding two conflicting truths at the exact same time. We are taught to avoid the extreme of clinging to a person, but also to avoid the heavy extreme of absolute aversion. Buddhism reminds us that the painful ending of a thing does not retroactively destroy the beauty of its existence. A flower that eventually wilts, turns brown, and falls back into the soil was still a genuinely magnificent flower when it bloomed. You do not look at a dry, fallen petal and angrily declare that the entire spring was an illusion. Imagine a single candle burning brightly in a quiet, dark room. For many long hours, it provides you with profound warmth. It perfectly illuminates your surroundings, allowing you to read, to rest, and to feel incredibly safe in the shadows. But eventually, the wax burns down. The flame aggressively flickers, the wick releases a harsh line of smoke, and the room violently falls back into darkness. Do you curse the candle for going out? Do you tell yourself the bright light it gave you earlier in the night was a lie? No, the light was beautifully real. The harsh smoke and the darkness that follow are also real. They simply belong to entirely different moments in time. In our relationships, we fiercely struggle to accept this dual reality because your friend carelessly exposed your private truth today. You feel incredibly foolish for having celebrated their presence last year. You feel like a hypocrite if you quietly admit that you still miss the way they used to understand you. But you can acknowledge that they deeply broke your trust while simultaneously honoring the undeniable truth that they once brought you immense joy. You do not have to hate the beautiful chapters just because the ending was written in pain. Ask yourself, are you exhausting your own spirit by trying to violently rewrite the history of this friendship? What if you simply allowed the good parts to remain good without needing them to excuse the current betrayal? Pause. Breathe. Let a joyful memory of that friend rise in your mind right now. Observe it without immediately rushing to punish yourself for feeling it. Honor the chapter for exactly what it was, and then gently close the book. Stop trying to erase the warmth of the light just because the room has finally gone dark. Let the beauty of the past rest peacefully where it belongs, because only when you stop fighting the memory of what was can you truly look at the empty space they left behind. And this is where the next truth begins. 6. The empty space as a quiet gift. What if the distance between you and this friend is not a punishment, but a profound clearing? Here is a truth that is deeply uncomfortable to face. We are absolutely terrified of empty spaces. When a friendship breaks down and the trust is finally gone, an immediate void opens up in your life. The weekend suddenly feels uncomfortably quiet. Your phone does not light up with their name. The silence in your life feels loud, heavy, and deeply threatening. To avoid this agonizing emptiness, we often rush to completely fill the void. We try to force a hollow reconciliation. We surround ourselves with meaningless distractions, or we quickly pour our energy into new, untested relationships just to feel seen again. We treat the absence of a person as a terrifying problem that must be immediately fixed. In Buddhist thought, emptiness is not something to be feared. It is not a barren, lonely wasteland. Buddhism reminds us that an empty bowl is useful precisely because there is nothing inside it. Emptiness is a fertile ground of pure potential. The exact space left behind by a broken attachment is the required space for a new, healthier reality to take root. Imagine a dense, overgrown forest where the towering, ancient trees block all the sunlight from reaching the ground below. It is beautiful, but no new seeds can possibly grow in the permanent shadows. But one day, a fierce, unexpected storm rolls through and strikes down one of the largest trees. When it falls, it leaves a massive, glaring gap in the forest canopy. At first, the broken wood looks entirely like a tragedy, but soon, direct sunlight pours onto the dark forest floor for the very first time in years. In that newly created empty space, a completely new kind of life begins to beautifully bloom. In our own lives, we relentlessly grieve the fallen tree without ever realizing the brilliant sunlight it has finally let in. The departure of an old friend, especially one who could no longer safely hold your deepest truth, leaves a significant gap in your daily routine. But it also creates the profound emotional space needed for new, trustworthy connections to eventually enter. You cannot invite a new, protective presence into your life if all your internal rooms are completely occupied by the heavy baggage of a broken trust. Ask yourself, are you staring so intently at the fallen tree that you are missing the sunlight hitting the ground? What if this uncomfortable silence is exactly what you need to finally hear your own voice? Pause, breathe. Sit quietly in the empty space for just a moment. Do not rush to fill the silence. Let the quiet exist without violently labeling it as loneliness. Stop trying to drag the fallen tree back up into the canopy. The clearing is not a void, it is a quiet invitation, because creating physical and emotional space is absolutely necessary for new beginnings. But to truly step into that sunlight, you must first release the deepest invisible tie that still binds you to the pain. And this is where the next truth begins. 7. Forgiveness as the ultimate release. What if forgiving the person who betrayed you has absolutely nothing to do with them? Here is the truth few people want to face. When we hear the word forgiveness, our ego immediately recoils. When a deep trust is broken and your private secrets are carelessly shared, you feel a fierce, instinctual need for justice. You believe that if you forgive them, you are somehow saying that their betrayal was acceptable. You fear that forgiving them means you must quietly invite them back into your inner circle, or that you are entirely erasing the severity of their actions. So, you stubbornly withhold forgiveness as a form of silent punishment. You keep the heavy ledger of their wrongs perfectly balanced in your mind, endlessly waiting for a profound apology that may never arrive. But in refusing to forgive, you remain deeply tied to the very person who broke your peace. You carry their thoughtless actions with you into every new room you enter. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that forgiveness is not a pardon for the offender. It is the deliberate untying of a painful knot within yourself. In Buddhist thought, holding on to a deep grievance is like chaining yourself to the person who harmed you. Forgiveness is simply the courageous act of unlocking the chain. It does not mean the betrayal was right, and it certainly does not mean they deserve your sacred trust again. It only means you completely refuse to let their past actions control your present inner stillness. Imagine you are holding one end of a thick, heavy rope. At the other end of this rope stands the friend who betrayed you. They are pulling hard, dragging you into the mud, pulling you completely off balance. You are forced to exhaust all your spiritual strength just to stay on your feet. You secretly believe that if you just pull hard enough, in the other direction, you can force them to truly see your pain. You fight this, your hands blister, your muscles ache, and your entire life becomes violently focused on resisting their pull. But you have forgotten a simple, life-changing truth. You do not have to win the tug of war. You only have to open your hands and drop the rope. In our daily lives, we hold this heavy rope constantly. We hold it tightly every time we wait for a betrayer to apologize before we allow ourselves to gracefully move on. We hold the rope when we let the painful memory of their gossip dictate how we feel on a quiet Sunday morning. We hold it when we let their past mistake ruin our current joy. Dropping the rope does not mean they win the game. It simply means the war is finally over, and you are entirely free to walk away from the mud. Ask yourself, are you endlessly waiting for an apology to set you free when you have had the power to release yourself this entire time? What are you afraid will happen if you simply let the rope fall? Is this heavy grudge bringing you peace or feeding your exhaustion? Pause, breathe, feel the heavy, imaginary tension in your hands right now. Now, consciously open your fingers and let it go. You do not have to call them. You do not have to rebuild the bridge. You only have to release your desperate grip on the grievance. Stop trying to win a battle against someone who has already left the field. Let the heavy rope fall silently to the ground, because releasing the pain of the past is the only way to free your hands for the beauty of the future. But dropping the rope often leaves us feeling deeply afraid to ever reach out and hold someone else's trust again. And this is where the next truth begins. 8. The courage to trust again. What if the heavy walls you built to protect yourself are the very things keeping you in the dark? Here is the truth few people want to face. The deepest wound of a betrayal is not what it does to your past, but what it silently tries to do to your future. When a close friend carelessly exposes your private truth, you make a quiet, desperate vow. You swear you will never let anyone get that close ever again. You become intensely guarded. You keep your conversations perfectly measured and safely superficial. You treat every new acquaintance as a potential threat, relentlessly analyzing their motives, constantly waiting for the inevitable moment they let you down. You build a massive, impenetrable fortress around your open heart. You feel incredibly secure behind these thick stone walls, but as the months pass, you also feel profoundly, suffocatingly alone. You have successfully locked the pain out, but you have also locked yourself in. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that shutting out the entire world does not prevent suffering. It only guarantees a different kind of pain. In Buddhist thought, a peaceful heart is meant to remain soft, fluid, and open, even in a world where things inevitably break. Closing yourself off completely is a reaction born entirely of fear, not a state of genuine peace. True strength is not found in building a permanent emotional fortress. True strength is walking bravely through the open field, knowing deeply that if the storm ever returns, you have the inner resilience to survive the rain. Imagine a beautiful, vibrant bird that was once deeply injured while flying freely through the dense trees. Terrified of the sharp branches, the violent winds, and the sudden predators, It retreats to a small, cold iron cage. The door of the cage is completely open. There is absolutely no lock. The sky outside is warm, expansive, and incredibly inviting. But the bird stubbornly refuses to leave the iron bars, choosing the cramped, restrictive safety of the cage over the boundless, unpredictable possibility of the open sky. It survives the elements perfectly, but it no longer remembers how to fly. In our modern lives, we step inside this open cage constantly. We meet someone entirely new, someone kind, genuine, and potentially trustworthy, but we absolutely refuse to share anything real about our inner lives. We start a promising new friendship, but we hold back our true thoughts, terrified those words will eventually be repeated and used against us. We let the heavy shadow of one reckless, thoughtless friend completely dictate how we treat every single person we meet. We survive our daily routines without ever being betrayed, but we completely lose the profound, undeniable joy of authentic human connection. Ask yourself, are you unknowingly punishing new, innocent people for the careless mistakes of an old friend? Are you hiding in a cage with an open door? What are you truly afraid will happen if you simply allow yourself to be seen again? Pause, breathe. Notice the heavy, invisible armor you are wearing right now. You do not have to share your absolute deepest secrets with the very next person you meet. You can be quietly discerning, but you must be willing to let the light back in. Stop letting the fear of a broken trust rob you of the beautiful, deeply healing connections that are waiting just ahead. Take one small, courageous step outside the iron bars, because a tightly guarded heart may be completely safe from betrayal, but it is also entirely safe from joy. And this is where the final truth begins. 9. The peace of a free heart. What if the greatest act of self-respect is simply deciding that you no longer need them to understand your pain? Let us return to the quiet, heavy moment we spoke of at the beginning. The exact moment you realized your most fragile, unspoken pieces were carelessly handed to the world. In that agonizing second, you felt entirely powerless. You felt exposed, invisible, and deeply betrayed by the one person you thought would always keep you safe. You spent countless hours replaying the betrayal, desperately trying to solve an emotional puzzle that was missing half of its pieces. But look closely at where you are standing right now. You have survived the violent breaking of the illusion. You have stood by the edge of the muddy river and witnessed the harsh reality of an altered friendship without allowing the current to sweep you away. You have learned that the quiet lake simply lost its protective depth, and that their thoughtless words were never a true reflection of your profound worth. Buddhist wisdom does not ask you to pretend the betrayal did not hurt. It never demands that you silence your own grief. Instead, it asks you to observe the wound without letting it become the heavy center of your entire world. It reminds us that holding on to deep resentment is like grasping a burning ember, and that the only way to heal your aching hands is to finally drop the heavy rope. You are no longer bound to the fading ghost of who they used to be. You do not have to fiercely protect the beautiful memories, nor do you have to violently erase them. You can simply let them rest peacefully in the past, exactly where they belong. The sudden empty space they left behind in your life is not a tragic punishment. It is the necessary clearing in the dense forest. It is the beautiful warm sunlight finally pouring onto the dark ground, quietly inviting a new, healthier kind of connection to take root. You now possess the profound courage to walk completely out of the iron cage with the open door. You are ready to let the open sky touch your wings again. You are ready to trust, not because you naively believe no one will ever break your heart again, but because you know deeply that you are entirely strong enough to survive it if they do. True peace is not the absence of betrayal in the world. True peace is the unshakable knowing that another person's careless behavior can never completely destroy your inner sanctuary. Ask yourself one final time, what are you choosing to carry into tomorrow? Are you choosing the heavy, sinking anchor of resentment, or the quiet, enduring peace of a truly free heart? Pause, breathe, feel the steady, quiet rhythm of your own chest. The violent storm has finally passed. You do not have to fight the heavy wind anymore. You do not have to tirelessly chase a closing door or wait endlessly for an apology that may never come. Let the old friendship be exactly what it was, and let the beautiful, open space it left behind be exactly what it is. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You can let go now.